before us here are the financial statements, the template for Excel that you downloaded from from Blackboard. And what we want to do is to begin to model our Excel financials after Peachtree. So we're all using this template and we're all in the same place. We're all on the same page. You notice that, excuse me, you notice that this template has a balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flow direct, statement of cash flow indirect. We will prepare all of these statements. Basically speaking, this model is driven by cash. Cash is a variable. Variables are items that are changed. And income and expenses. So in our income statement, there are income, revenue items and expenses. Those are all variables for the most part. In our cash flow, there are some variables, most not. In the balance sheet, there are no variables. And in the statement of cash flow indirect, there are no variables. The best way, best practice for building these financials is to do them in a specific order. And the order is to build from the income statement to the statement of cash flows direct, then to the balance sheet, then to the statement of cash flows indirect. When we start putting this model together, you'll see how that works. Now, these are our headings. Day one. Day one is the day that we first fund this business. And then month one are the other 29 or 30 days from this point. So all of this would be considered September. What we want to make sure happens is that our headings remain in the same place, so we need to freeze the panes. We always do this in a large spreadsheet so we can always see where we are. So in order to do that, we move our Excel file to View, and we go to Freeze Panes. First we set our cursor at the place that we want the panes frozen. We open Freeze Panes and we click on Freeze Panes. And there we have it. And you notice when I scroll down, day one remains, month one remains. We always know where we are. And if we scroll across, the row headings remain the same. So we should always do this. This is best practices. So let's get our business started as we did in Peachtree. The first thing we did in Peachtree, if we remember, to enter that. We also want to have we want to have this formatted in comma style, and we don't want any zeros, any decimal places. So our first bit of action is to borrow this money. Now, we mentioned variables. Variables are always painted a certain color so that we know that they're variables. And generally the color I like to use is green, so we'll paint this variable green. The other item that we started our business out with was the sale of stock. And that was, if you remember, $3 million. We have a $3 million sale of stock. That too is a variable. Variables mean these are items that can change. So we change that, $3 million sale of stock, $1 million loan. And those were our basic day one transactions. How much is our total cash? Well, we take a total of this, and best practices in putting together an Excel spreadsheet is to make sure that the formulas that you put in are as accurate as they can be for the situation. Right? So total cash is going to be the sum of all of these items. So even if there are no items there now, down the road when we copy this formula over, there will be items there, so we want to make this formula work now. So the formula is equal, and I don't want to change any. Formula is equal sum, and then we want to highlight the range that we're interested in, close parentheses, 4 million. So that's our total cash, $4 million. And this $4 million is linked to these two items. Okay, so the income statement, we said income statement was first, but we had no income in day one. So our next item would be the statement of direct cash flow. And now we want to finish up our statements. The next place that we want to go to is the balance sheet. So if we go to the balance sheet, the cash that we have here on this balance sheet is equal to total cash that's in the system, which is this amount. So that cash is linked to this. We have no inventory yet. So total assets is the sum of these numbers. So we can do a quick sum, auto sum. And our total assets are $4 million. Now we want to continue with putting together the financial statements. So the next piece is the loans payable. Well, the loans payable is linked to this loan that we took here. So if we type equal and click on loan, there's our loan payable amount. And stockholders equity, same thought processes. We click on sale of stock, link to the sale of stock. So now we have our liabilities and owner's equity side done. Loans payable, stockholders equity, no retained earnings. We want to add this up, total liabilities and stockholders equity. And if we do auto sum, click on auto sum. So now we have a complete balance sheet. $4 million in assets, $4 million in liabilities and owner's equity. And now the last piece of this will be the indirect statement of cash flow. We have no beginning balance. We have no net income. We have no inventory at the moment, but we do have this loan and the sale of stock. And those two things come from here. They are linked to our initial variable selection here at the direct statement of cash flow. So we want to link this to that. And we want to take the sale of stock and link it to this. And our total cash, again, we want to have it formula as right as possible now, so we'll include the entire range of information. And we've completed our financial statement for the first day. This was our first day financial. And if you remember back to Peachtree, this is what our first day financial looked like. $4 million in cash, $4 million in equity and loans payable, no income statement. Okay? So let's move on to the rest of the month. So in the rest of the month, income statement was first. Did we have sales in the rest of the month? Yes, we did. We sold $150,000 worth of shoes. So revenue, expenses, and cash are basically the Variables, they are the drivers. So we want to type in the $150,000 worth of shoes. And again, we want to format this in comma style. Take away the zeros, decimal places. So $150,000. This is our income statement. We're creating our income statement. And since it's a variable, we want to paint it green. And now we're looking at cost of goods sold. And cost of goods sold is a function of sales. Now, if you remember, we were selling these $100 shoes. We purchased shoes for $70 and we were selling them for $100. So the relationship between cost of goods sold and the sale was 70%. And so that's what this 0.7 is. So we want this number, our cost of goods sold, to be a function of the sale based on the cost of goods sold percentage. So we want to multiply this by this. Okay, so let's do that. And the formula would be equal to this. Now, this number, this 0.7, is going to be a reference point that's going to remain in this column, and we're going to reference it all the way out many, many more columns. So in order to keep this locked in this place, we need to do what's called absolute reference, and absolute reference is gotten to by clicking the F4 key. F4 puts dollar signs around that, and then we continue the multiplication, multiply that by 150,000, and our cost of goods sold is 105,000. Okay, so we'll talk more about how we do this absolute reference later in class. What's our net income? Actually, what we should have done, we should have these numbers always with the proper signs. Pluses mean additions, minuses mean subtraction. So this was our cost of goods sold is an expense, so it's a subtraction. So this number really should be negative. So I'm going to put a negative sign there. So now our net income will be the sum of these two numbers. We don't have to worry about adding, subtracting, etc. So this equals the sum of this, close parentheses, $45,000. If you think back to the Peachtree financials that we made, this is exactly the number that we had, $45,000. The next thing we do is we go into the statement of cash flows direct, starting with the beginning balance. The beginning balance is equal to the ending balance, or ending total cash balance. So if we link this beginning balance equal to this total cash ending balance, now we have $4 million as a beginning balance. Cash from customers. This cash from customers represents the cash that's received from the sale of shoes. Now, if you remember, when we sold these shoes to Macy's, I believe it was, they paid us right away. So the cash that we received from customers was the total amount of this sale. So we can say equal to that. That's the cash that we received from the customer, and that's a plus. Cash to vendors. Cash to vendors now is the cash that we spent on the shoes that we purchased. We purchased, if you remember, we purchased $1,001,000 worth of shoes. So that's the number that we're going to say is cash to vendors, and it's going to be a negative number. So we'll say minus 1 million. It's a hard number to write sometimes. $1,001,000. So is that right? That's exactly what I want. Minus $1,001,000, and that's a variable. So we will paint that green. and that's our cash to vendors. We've had no more loans. We've had no more sales of stock. So our total cash, we can take this formula and just drag it over, 3,149,000. It's added these up. If you want to see what your formulas are pointing at, you can take the F2 key, push the F2 key, and the F2 key will show you the items that are included. So we have everything included here, which is the way it should be. Now, the next statement that we want to do is the balance sheet. So we go up to the balance sheet, and we're now in month 1. So we want to use all of the powers of Excel as quickly as possible. So this $4 million is right now linked to the $4 million at the end of the statements. So we can just drag this over, and we should get, there's a 3,149,000. Okay. Now things begin to get a little tricky, because now we need to come up with an inventory number. Our inventory number is equal to, again, we've sold $150,000 worth of this inventory. So our inventory number is equal to our beginning balance, which is this. But now we have to be careful of the signs. Okay, we use signs in one respect to make it easy in terms of adding and subtracting, but we also want to make sure that the resulting number has the right sign. Right? So we want this to be positive, and it's got a negative sign around it, so we need to put a negative sign first. So we want to equal this beginning balance. Okay. And we're subtracting cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is already a negative number, so we're just adding that cost of goods sold. And we have $896,000. Now that seems like the right, at least it's the right sign. Okay, so our total assets now are $4,045,000. Net cash, inventory, $896,000. $4,045,000. Okay. Our loans payable, we can link this to that. Our stockholders' equity, we can link this to this. And now, if we take a total and we find that this and this are not equal. Our liabilities and owner's equity have to equal assets, and the item that's missing is this retained earnings. So that retained earnings is equal to the net income, which is here, 45,000. And now you see that our financial statement, our balance sheet, assets, total liabilities, and owner's equity are equal. Okay, so success for the balance sheet. And now let's go to our indirect cash flow. Again, we have a beginning balance, and our beginning balance is equal to this. And net income is equal to our net income from financials there. We don't have any, we do. Our inventory increase or decrease now is equal to the change from this period to this period. So that change equals to, hold on for 1 second. Okay, this change, we're looking at this change, and this change is equal to the difference between this and this. When you're doing the indirect cash flow statement, you're looking at changes in current assets. So that change is, we've had a change in inventory, a positive change in inventory, and that is a source or a use of cash. It is a use of cash, so this number needs to be a negative number because inventory is increased. This number should be a negative number. So to get it to be a negative number representing that change, we will do equal to this minus this. 896,000 minus. We've had no other changes. So our total cash, we drag this across, would be 3,149,000. Now cash flow has to equal cash flow, has to equal final cash. So we have financial statements through the end of the month, and if you compare these financial statements with the financial statements that we generated in Peachtree, you'll see that they're exactly the same. In the following lessons, we will go forward and do the other things that we need, continuing to follow Peachtree with these financial statements in Excel.